So your latest mock draft, you have Drake Maye going to Washington at 2. It seems like some of the narrative that had been swinging towards Jaden is now swinging back towards Drake a little bit. Why do you think that is happening? Why do you think Drake is the right fit for Washington?
Well, when I saw the Kliff Kingsbury hire, everybody was talking about, oh, they're trading up for Caleb Williams. But I kind of saw it another way, just because you talk about the air raid match with Drake Maye. Drake Maye's had that experience in his first season as a starter with Phil Longo and then transferring over to Chip Lindsey, who came over from Central Florida. He has experience in the air raid offense. So if I'm Adam Peters, I'm thinking, hey, this guy already has experience in the air raid. He understands the terminology, even though some things will be a little bit different just because the scheme is a little bit different. But the air raid concepts and the principles really are the same. So I think the learning curve won't be as steep for Drake as it is for Jaden, just because Jaden's never played in that type of offense before.
Right. So I kind of see that you could make an argument for any of these guys. Like, obviously, Caleb's Caleb. He worked with Kliff last year. Duh. You got the air raid stuff with Drake. Jaden, like the one thing Kliff did a lot of in the NFL was throwing the ball outside the numbers to the outside, which Jaden obviously did a ton because of the receiving talent he had at LSU. Do you think that all three of those guys could fit, or do you really like look at Drake and you're like, no, for what Kliff wants, that's the guy?
No, I mean, I think all three could fit. It's just a matter of how steep is the learning curve going to be for each one. With Caleb obviously already having experience and being in the room with Kliff, he understands Kliff's mannerisms, what he wants, and what he expects. So for Caleb, it would be the easiest for him just because he's been there. But Drake, he already has he's played in somewhat of a resemblance of the offense. The learning curve wouldn't be as steep, but for Jaden, he's never played in that type of offense. So the things that he's asked to do is something he's never done before. Now, that's not to say that he could never do it. I think he eventually can. But with rookie quarterbacks, we want to make the environment most comfortable for them as possible. So I think it would be a little bit more comfortable for both of those guys coming in as opposed to Jaden.
Jordan Reid, ESPN NFL draft analyst with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I think that obviously quarterback at 2 seems to be the consensus right now, but there is kind of what if they trade back? For you, as you rank these guys, how big is the gap between those top 3 and whoever your QB4 is?
Well, I think it's significant, but it's getting smaller as the days go on and on, just because that fourth guy, depending on who you talk to, it could be Bo Nix, it could be J.J. McCarthy, and there's some people that even have Michael Penix in that 4th spot. But, for me, it'd be J.J. McCarthy. But inside of those top 15 picks, it does get a little bit scary for me with J.J. McCarthy. But with those top 3 potentially going back to back to back at the top of the draft, that 4th guy is always going to be pushed up in what I call the quarterback tax, just because there's going to be so many teams, whether it's the Giants at 6, and then that stretch of teams that need quarterbacks at 11, 12, and then also 13 with the Vikings, Broncos, and then the Raiders, to where somebody's probably going to want to jump up ahead of those teams to eventually get their guy.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting when Kliff spoke to the media, and there wasn't much, Kliff was very close to the vest, but he said straight up, like, I wouldn't call my offense air raid anymore. By the same token, it's Kliff Kingsbury. Like, dude's been in the air raid his whole life. Some of the concepts are going to be there. So when you think about defining what an air raid offense looks like and the concepts that you think he would be smart to keep in the modern NFL, how those match with some of these young quarterbacks, like, what are we actually talking about here if we all want to sit down and watch tape and try to do our own evaluation to the best extent that we can?
Well, there's a lot of 10 and 11 personnel, so either 4 wide receivers or 1 tight end and 3 receivers on the field at all times, and that's the basis of his offense. There's a lot of spatial reads, so keeping receivers on the run, reading coverage, so you have to be able to read coverage on the run, and then also taking deep shots down the field. That's what the air raid really specializes in. So a lot of light personnel. You have to have really good receivers that are good after the catch, just because you want to get the ball in their hands quick in those underneath or intermediate spatial types of routes. But also, you pick and choose when you take your shots deep down the field, which is something that we've seen quite a bit, even in his days at Arizona with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, it's funny because, to me that sounds something, the spatial reads is something that would be super beneficial with a lot of these kind of amoeba defenses that we're seeing, yet 3 feet, or maybe not 3 feet, what are we, about 7 feet from Andy Reid right now? Sitting over there. He's, running West Coast offense version that he's been running and updating for 30 years. But do you see that now that these, as the defenses become less, I don't want to say structured, but like it's less definitive between man and zone. You have a lot of these zone match concepts and things that it is harder to translate what quarterbacks are doing in college to how they can read that out in the NFL, or are there certain systems where you're like, no, that actually has some translatable qualities?
That's a great question, and it really just depends on the coach and the scheme that you're talking about. A lot of times in college, there's a lot of RPO, or what are called object reads. So object meaning that I'm reading one single person on the defense, whether it's the linebacker or the safety, putting them in RPO situations to where they can't be right. But in the NFL, you're going to have to make multi-step progressions, getting from 1 to 2 to 3 to your check down, or even going through and exhausting up to 5 options, which is something that a lot of guys haven't had a lot of experience with. So I think that's why the learning curve can be so steep for some guys, just because their offenses are so object read or RPO centric.
Jordan Reid, ESPN NFL draft analyst, with us here on the Hoffman Show. If you're Washington at those second pair of picks they have, 36 and 40, are there any particular players that you're like, I really hope that guy falls out of the end of the first round, whether it's a tackle, guard, defensive end, some of the other positions that they may be looking at?
I think they have to come out of it addressing the trenches, whether it's a defensive end or offensive tackle, some way or another. They have to address the trenches, just because I think you have a lot of inconsistency at both of your tackle spots, whether it's Andrew Wiley or Charles Leno. I think they can upgrade from both of those spots, and then you lost 2 of your high-end rushers. You traded both of them away in Sweat and Chase Young. So they have to get a defensive end and an offensive tackle. Somebody like a Patrick Paul from Houston, I definitely think could be a fit. And then defensive end, Adisa Isaac from Penn State is one name that I definitely would keep an eye on.
So my podcast co-host Logan Paulson thinks that Darius Robinson is like the new prototype Washington player. When he listens to DQ and he listens to Joe Witt talk, that violent physical player. What do you think of him both as a player and his chances of falling to 36?
So I was on the field during the Senior Bowl practices, and
that's where Logan fell in love with him.
I'm standing beside him, and I'm just like, holy, you know what? When I said that, I know this is a family show. I can't say the other word.
It's not necessarily a family show, but we are regulated by the FCC.
Right. But, yeah, that was my instant reaction to seeing Darius Robinson up close. I mean, 6'5", 280 pounds. The thing that I love about him is just the versatility. You can use him all the way from a 0 technique, which is right over the center, to a 5 technique, the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle. He can play all those positions. He has the NFL body right away. If there was a game tomorrow, you could put him out there and he'd be just fine. He's a really good run defender. He's explosive as a pass rusher. He has those heavy hands that you love to see too. So the combination of the size, the NFL-ready body, and then just the versatility, I think he's ready to go right away.
Who's your favorite player in this draft?
Just overall?
Yeah, like you could pick
outside
any dude.
Of quarterback,
it'd
be Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback of Toledo. I love everything about him, man. His story is terrific. How he came up from being a gray shirt, having to sit out his first year at Toledo, staying patient, working his tail off, and then going in and being an All-American player right away. His ascension at the Senior Bowl, I thought he was by far the best player there. And then just the games that he had to play against upper-level competition, whether it was Ohio State his junior year, last year against Illinois, I thought he held up really well. So I think he's going to be a big-time tester inside of Lucas Oil Stadium too. So he just continued to put positive things on tape, and then he just continued to check boxes throughout the pre-draft process. So I think he could be the first corner off of the board.
Wow.
I think that highly of him, and I love Tyrion Arnold of Alabama, but if he goes off the board first, it would not surprise me at all.
All right, there you go. For more from Jordan, of course, ESPN.com and ESPN's immense NFL Combine programming on television. Good to see you, man.
Thank you as always.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.